Specialize in 20-somethings, and I try to remind them, contrary to what everybody says, these are probably not going to be the happiest, best years of your life.
I interviewed leading psychologist and best-selling author of The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter, and How to Make the Most of Them Now, Dr. Meg Jay, about how to find happiness in your 20s.
I'm Dr. Meg Jay. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I specialize in 20-somethings, and right now I'm in New York City.
Yeah, if you could please tell me how you got involved with what you do and what inspires you about it.
Yeah, so I started specializing in 20-somethings when I was in graduate school. So I was going to grad school for clinical psychology. I worked with a lot of different age groups. I remember thinking I would probably work with kids, but I found that to be extremely heartbreaking because they're just not in control of their lives. And so then I discovered working with young adults who are just starting to be in control of their lives, and I just found that to be so inspiring to help them, chart their own course and figure out what makes them happy, healthy, successful, and how can I help them get there. Yeah, so I have two books for 20-somethings. One is The Defining Decade, and it's really about, how to seize the opportunities of your 20s and be intentional during that time. And the other's called The Twentysomething Treatment, and it's about young adult mental health and kind of specifically how to be happier and healthier in your 20s and beyond.
And so in these books, what are the main principles that you describe to how someone can set themselves up for a good life in their 20s?
Yeah, so I think Freud has a quote, work and love, love and work, that's all there is. And I don't know if that's all there is, but that's definitely, the top two items on 20-somethings' minds. And so I think that, they start to feel happier, healthier, more confident, more competent when they make some progress in those areas. So both books, have a lot to do with how to help 20-somethings make some progress in those areas, figure out, what do I want out of work? What do I want out of love? What is it that's going to make me feel happy, healthy, and successful? And, what do I need to start doing to get there?
So what does happiness mean to you?
Tough for me to answer that outside of the context of my jobs. I mean, I think about happiness of what does it mean for other people? So I guess my answer to that, whether it's for me or for the people that I'm working with, is happiness means whatever you decide it means, but you should put some thought into that. You should decide for yourself what happiness means. So, I've taught positive psychology around the world, and, kind of in broad strokes, Western cultures, happiness is positive emotions, fun, excitement. Happiness, as we think about it in the West. Eastern cultures, happiness is sort of more about contentment, so it's less sort of high highs, but it's also less low lows of just feeling like, I feel good about my life. I'm happy with what I have versus like I'm happy, yay, excited, fun things are happening. So I don't have a judgment on whether people are more of the happy people or the contentment happy people, but I think putting some thought into that for yourself as a young adult is, it's when people start to think about, well, what's my definition of happiness? What is it going to mean for me? Is it having all these positive experiences, or is it being happy with what I have, which is more of a contentment end of things?
Your book focuses largely on how to find success in family life and the workplace. Why should we seek these specific things to live the happiest life possible?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I'll push back a little bit, because I think it is a Western notion that is the ultimate goal, is to live a happy life. I think in more Eastern cultures, people would not say that was the ultimate goal. They would say it's to do right by their community or contribute to the collective good. It's kind of more of a Western notion, individualistic, of like, my goal is to have a happy life. I don't have any issues with that, but I think you get to decide whether or not that is your goal. For people who it is their goal, believe it or not, that work is the largest contributor to sort of growth and learning in 20-somethings, and it has a lot to do with whether people feel happy in their life, is whether or not that thing they spend 40 hours a week doing is something they feel good about. And again, you get to decide on, like, what do you mean by I feel good about my job? But it's, in my experience, people are not happy When they don't have a job they feel good about, or they don't feel like they're working toward a job they're going to feel good about. And that's the tricky part in your 20s, is that you're probably going to do a fair number of jobs that you don't feel good about in the moment, but that are going to get you to something that you feel really good about. So you got to really sort of balance that future thinking, present thinking. You know, where I am in my life right now, in my career right now, I feel amazing about it, but I did a lot of things to get here that were not amazing and did not make me happy in the moment. But they were working towards something that I did want a lot. So, you know, I think that happiness, especially in young adulthood, is sometimes a long form project. But we do know that people are happier and healthier when they have work they feel good about. And also that, you know, we're social creatures, that loneliness tends to make people feel unhappy. And so whatever family is for you, and again, that's something that is so great about being a young adult, you get to decide. What does that mean for me? Is my family going to be a group of friends? Is it going to be a partner? Is it going to be a partner with kids? You know, whatever it's going to look like, you get to choose. And I think that's really the project of, you know, maybe authentic happiness or personal happiness is deciding what's my definition. You know, it's not like there's an external standard that I need to meet to be happy or successful.
And so today, how important is community to happiness?
I mean, it's so important. I think especially for young adults today, and really of the last 2-3 generations, because, you know, for people who do want a partner and they do want kids, those things are happening later than they used to. So you're going to spend usually a good 10-15 years of your young adulthood without a partner. So you're probably going to need some friends. So friendship to me is really, you know, sort of the first project before thinking about partners. And we also know that adults of all ages are less likely to live near extended family than they used to be. So, you know, you're going to need your tribe, your friends, your community, probably at all ages. So just like having the skills to figure out, well, what do I need from a community or from a tribe? Is it 3 people? Is it 30 people? What does it look like? How do I build that? That's absolutely going to contribute to your sense of happiness. So a lot of people ask me, you know, how are the 20s of today different than when I was in my 20s? I'm a Gen Xer, so, you know, in a lot of ways they were similar. People worked a lot of different jobs, they had different relationships, settled down later, had kids later, all that. The big difference was we did not have social media, which I personally am thankful for. You know, I think it's a challenge for young adults that, you know, compare and despair, you know, as people say, that there's a tendency to go online and then to see other people's versions of happiness, and of course to see their happiest moments, even if they're false or canned or totally produced. And then you know, compare the realities of your life to other people's best moments. So, you know, I don't think that contributes to happiness. But, you know, I think social media, it's like a substance or junk food or whatever. It's not whether you use it, it's how you use it. And part of adulthood is kind of taking control of that relationship of like, what's my relationship with social media? How am I using it? When am I using it? Why am I using it? And what do I want to do about that? I don't really know a way around just sort of having to come to terms with that. But I think that is part of the journey of being a young adult is kind of doing a gut check on like, why am I using it? How am I using it? How is it making me feel? And do I need to change that?
From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, what are the moments where you find yourself happiest?
Um, I have a lot of happiness in my life at this point, and I guess that is something that I'm always emphasizing with people. You know, I specialize in 20-somethings, and I try to remind them, contrary to what everybody says, these are probably not going to be the happiest, best years of your life. People have been told that, they've heard that. It's actually empirically not true. That your 20s tend to be a pretty difficult time and can be a mental health low point, a personal low point, even though there's a lot of cool, fun highs going on, that people generally feel happier the older they get. So I'm at a point in my life where I have a lot of different sources of happiness. I have a job that I love, kids that I love, a spouse that I love, a town that I love. which is great. And I didn't have any of that when I was in my 20s. And just so I think for people to remember that, time is on your side, growth is on your side. And having, I think, diversified happiness is probably a pretty good idea. That when things are going wrong with my kids, I've got my work, and then when I'm having a terrible day at work, I come home and enjoy seeing my family. I've got great friends in my town. I live amongst a beautiful setting. So it's nice to have more than one source.
Your new book focuses on mental health. What do you recommend to 20-somethings to mitigate depression and anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. 20-somethings, they have more highs and more lows than older populations. So it's just a time of extreme emotions. So people can be extremely happy and extremely sad, sometimes all in the same day or week or month or year. So there's kind of a lot going on there. But, like I say in that book, The 20-something Treatment, life is the best therapist. I mean, what we know is that mental health gets better when life gets better. So I think as people start to feel some sort of meaning or purpose or success or joy at their work, they start to feel better about their relationships, their friendships, their relationships with a partner, with their parents, whatever, then mental health improves. I think especially for 20-somethings, putting it in that context it's often not a problem within the person as much as it's just like there are a lot of struggles that they're dealing with, and as the environment gets better, your life gets better.
So would you say happiness is easier to find the older you get?
So I think as you get older, hopefully you get wiser and you learn, let me focus on some of the good things that I have, or let me be sure that I'm noticing the good things in the world. The 20-something brain tends to skew negative. So if it's given mixed information or an uncertain situation, it's going to focus on the negative. That's just normal. But I think as people get older, they tend to get better at looking for the positive, noticing the positive, and not having the positive be ruined by the negative. And I think that's a big contributor to why people get happier over time, as well as that you're just in more control of your life. So you're able to, you're surrounded by things you've chosen to do. I think you have a lot less of that control when you're younger.
People have always seemed to associate freedom with happiness. Do you agree with that?
I do associate freedom with happiness, but I actually don't associate freedom with the 20s, believe it or not. I mean, I think people are actually quite constrained by, I don't have any money, I don't have sort of the identity capital to choose amongst good job options. I don't have a family to travel with or do things with. I think we imagine 20-somethings as being very, very free, it being carefree. I think they're very constrained and not very carefree at all because there's so much stress and they have so little resources that I actually think you will be surprised, very pleasantly surprised, that you'll become freer. I think if you play your cards right, the older you get, because you'll have more job options, you'll have more options to set up your life exactly the way you want it. That tends to make people happier. And to me, that is freedom over, okay, in your 20s, it's like, what? I'm free from what? Free from having a family or kids or a big job, when that's actually the kinds of things that we know make people feel happier.
I remember one of the characters in your book was doing exactly that. He didn't want to settle down anywhere, didn't want to commit to anything specific.
And he was like so miserable. I was like, okay, keep doing it. All right.
So you taught at Semester at Sea about happiness. Were there any big takeaways from teaching that course?
I mean, I'll say a couple things. So yeah, I taught positive psychology on Semester at Sea. So we looked at happiness and what does that mean in different countries as we traveled around the world, which was really, really great context, because I think Westerners, people from the US especially, young people, you're sort of been told like happiness is like fun and positive emotions. I thought it was really cool for people to see, oh, well, there's actually a version of it called contentment, which is not like more and more everything amazing as much as it's like, I'm happy with what I have. That anybody could be happy in this very moment if they're happy with what they have. That it's nothing they need to go get. They're like, I could be happy at any moment if it's just about contentment. So that was really, I think, important for people to realize there's more than one definition of happiness, and I get to decide. It doesn't have to be what I'm seeing on social media. The other thing that I enjoyed learning about teaching was the World Happiness Report, and I don't know if you talk about that, and you should check it out, or I'll send it to you. Email me and remind me. But that was really interesting because it's that report. It comes out every year, and they're always like, "Oh, the world's happiest country is whatever," and which is impossible to sort of boil down to one country or why. But one thing that I think resonated with me in it, I think especially for young adults right now, is that it is something you see around the world, that happiness goes down in countries when people lose trust in institutions. And I think that's something we're really grappling with in the US right now, is that people have lost trust in the government, politicians, the healthcare system, where we stand on climate, et cetera. And it's been interesting to see that happen in my lifetime, that people lose trust in institutions and see how that erodes a sense of happiness. And I don't have the answer to that other than to say, I think, everybody can just do what they can do and, try to find ways that in your life you're cultivating meaning and purpose and trust and some good in the world. But I do think it's hard when you look at the institutions around you and don't feel like you have faith in them anymore. Part of what we talked about in that course was religion and happiness. And, studies show that people who have some sense of faith, they tend to be happier, and it's often because they feel like, it's not just them out there trying to make their way, but somebody's got this, there's a plan, and, whether you believe in that or not, we do know that people who feel that way tend to be happier and more at ease, I think, because they feel less like, what if life is meaningless?
The big unanswerable questions.
Right. Somebody else is doing it, yeah.